Jesus Christ. Amen. As I travel toward campus every morning, there are a couple of my favorite stations that get staticky and become harder to hear. Sometimes the static is very irritating to me and I turn the station off. And sometimes I want to finish the song enough to bear with the static. This also happens when I travel north to Seattle to visit my parents. Around Longview or so, each Portland station eventually becomes fuzzy as static overtakes it. I change the channel, try to catch the last of the Portland stations, but eventually all of the Portland stations that I listen to become fuzzy and too hard to hear. As mainline Christians, with a liturgical format, we understand the idea of call and response. That is the radio frequency that we are most used to. There are several places in our liturgy today where there is a call and a response. Some are obvious and some are more subtle. For an example, an obvious call and response is, "The Lord be with you." That was good. I didn't even have to read the next part. I also say, "The peace of the risen Christ be with you always." Right, so you understand that. And when I say good morning, you say good morning back. Sometimes we do something called the Great Thanksgiving, which we do every so often. We say a few note by heart. "The Lord be with you." We lift up our hearts.
We lift up to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
Yes, it is right to give thanks and praise.
Good job. So in regular, ordinary life, one of our calls and responses is, when I say, "How are you doing?" most people answer, "Well, I'm fine," or "I'm okay." Sometimes that's unfortunate, right? Because we're not giving an honest answer, but we're so used to that. That is our call and our response. It's part of the frequency of the American culture. And there are some not so obvious calls and responses as well. For example, when the gospel lesson is read, you all stand. You stand in respect for the gospel because it's the most important part of worship. I rarely have to ask you to stand. Sometimes at funerals, maybe I do. And I don't have to ask you to stand because you're already tuned in. If I were to have to ask you to stand, I would really be asking you to change your radio frequency from your worldly thoughts and that put you into a fuzzy place in the first place and tune them in to the worship of the morning. Another automatic call and response happens with the words, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." And it's something that just automatically happens. It happens somewhere in our bodies. We respond to that. And even if you don't know the entire prayer by heart, I'll bet you'll repeat the words that you do know. With people in the hospital, with people with dementia, even people near death, I've seen so many times the response the Lord's Prayer evokes. And it's pretty amazing. It's a powerful response. I know that there's some music therapy lesson in this, but it's about our faith. It's the response of our faith. It's our response to God's call. The texts today, all of them, speak into God's call on our lives. In Isaiah, the text we read is called the servant's mission. It speaks into God's calling, one of a person who was called from the womb. Not just calling, but God named this person to be the servant. It reads, "The Lord called me before I was born. While I was in my mother's womb, he named me." God is setting the radio frequency for you even before you are born. Isaiah also reads, "Surely my cause is with the Lord and my reward with my God. It is the Lord who gives us purpose. We are formed in the womb to hear God's voice, to be God's servants." That's our true frequency. So let us sit with that for just a moment. We are called before we are born. God is the one who names us. we are called to be God's servant. That is our mission. That is our frequency. That is what we're to tune into. And I don't think it matters what your name is or where you were born or who your parents are. That is the same for every person. You're called to be God's servant. Period. God calls and we are supposed to respond. And sometimes, I admit, it takes a while to figure it out. Sometimes it takes a while for us to answer back. Sometimes it takes a while for us to cut through the fuzzy static. But truly, we are here for a purpose. And I'm pretty sure it isn't to follow our own plans. Romans 8:28 says we know that all things work together for the good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Our call from God leans on our faith. Sometimes we search the channels listening for a clear station, and sometimes God breaks through the static. For whatever reason, our frequency to God's call is filled with commercials of our own worries, news reports of how much work needs to be done, statistics of financial fears. Or maybe it's the opposite. We hear God's call loud and clear, but we don't know how to answer it because our hopes and our dreams poke at us so that we purposefully turn the channel. Or plain old fear creeps in because God's call usually doesn't make us very comfortable. It might mean doing a whole lot of things differently. The thing is that we are called just by being born in whatever way it came to be. But birth places you in hearing range of God. And even before birth, God called you to be a servant. So what does God need to do to get your attention? What does the Lord need to do to get you to put aside all these distractions and listen to his station? You're all here for a reason. When Jesus went to the cross, it wasn't so that you wouldn't pay attention. It was to get you to tune in. And if that didn't do it, Jesus rose from the dead, claiming victory over death, giving you hope of eternal life. That's a pretty high frequency. The response is up to you. Sometimes changing the station only requires a little responsive, earnest prayer. It's a tool that can change the frequency of any channel you hear. On the other hand, you don't have to tune in at all. You can keep living the way you live and keep moving at the pace you move. And you know the cool thing is that God will keep trying to reach you. God keeps calling, and eventually when we aren't distracted, God will reach us and we will respond. But God will never give up on you. Never. And in truth, God knows how to reach you and how to move through the static, for you are his. He called you and he named you, and you are here for a purpose. Your life has a purpose, so I hope you tune in. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Amen.